Rio Vidal, aka Death. She is a character in the MCU, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And if you've watched any of my other videos that I've recently released, especially the one on Scarlet Witch being the Babylon archetype, then you'll know what I'm talking about when I say what hypersigils are. And to run down what that is in a spiritual context, it's a way of the spiritual realms reflecting in the physical and vice versa. Normally, it's through some form of artwork, and it's been a thing for a very long time. Though maybe not always intentional, some, however, can be. And it's a way of getting across an intention or a message into the human psyche en masse. So even for non-spiritual people, they should be able to pick up on stuff like this. And it's normally to get a message across or something that's going on in the spiritual realms. So with the Scarlet Witch, aka Wanda Maximoff from the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, in that video where I talked about her, I explained how she's a representation of the goddess Babylon, who fits the archetype of the red goddess, a part of the divine feminine. Now, hypersigils are not just about people or archetypes. They can also be about certain situations and phenomenon. Rio Vidal is another character found in the MCU that is also a hypersigil. And she has a lot of imagery and a lot of spiritual connections to her as a character. This video is going to explain that in further detail. So let's delve into it. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. My name's Sarah. I'm that divination witch. I hope you stick around. This channel is a safe space where you can ask questions, nothing silly, and everybody's different. I encourage people to ask. If you have a question, help each other out as well in the comments. Ask away. If you like that, you know what to do. Hit subscribe. I've also got a link tree below. If you want to support the channel further, I offer readings on my website and Etsy, and I'm also teaching tarot on Patreon and memberships. Also on Patreon, it's the Year of the Dark Goddess in 2025. So we are working through the different archetypes of the Divine Feminine, especially the Dark Divine Feminine, and we are embracing our power. So if you like that, you know what to do. Go check it out. See what it's about. So Rio Vidal as a character is a representation of death. And she is found in the comic books as well. Although I'm not going to focus on that. I'm focusing on her MCU portrayal, which is the cinematic universe. And it's not lost on me how hypersigils and how many synchronicities are in comic book worlds in general. Grant Morrison, he wrote a book on this. He is part of the comic book world, but he spoke about hypersigils and the whole theory of comic book characters and themes becoming something more. The book itself is called Super Gods. Go check it out if you're interested in knowing more. I am not sponsored by Grant Morrison. He doesn't even know who I am, but he does delve quite a lot into it. Actually, it's right beside me here because I recently got it myself and it's quite a thick one. So there you go. If you're interested, if you want to find out more, check it out. Now, since this character, Death, is a cosmic entity or a goddess per se, of course she's going to have a lot of symbolism, and that will reflect on a spiritual level anyways. That much is obvious. She is an example of something that doesn't have a subtle approach, you could say, but it's nevertheless pretty interesting. Because for me, as somebody who works with a lot of death deities, especially Hecate, it was obvious as soon as I watched Agatha all along who Rio was going to be. And before I even knew what a hypersigil was, I just knew this was a case of things reflecting on each other. So let me first recap. Who is Rio Vidal? Well, first, can I just say her name means River of Life, I believe, in Spanish, which that itself is pretty ironic, given who she is. But so far, what we've seen of her is only what's been found in the TV show Agatha All Along, which in itself is a sequel to WandaVision, another TV show. And it picks up on a witch called Agatha Harkness and her story and the events after WandaVision onward. The show is about witchcraft, and so naturally it's going to be packed with a lot of symbolism and references. And I've actually done a video about that in the past. It's on the channel if you want to go have a look. And I am admittedly a fan of the show. Now, Rio Vidal is a character with a complex history. So she is a woman with a complex history, and that complex history involves Agatha. Now, not everything is being revealed in the show directly. A lot of it is led up to subtext. But you never know, we might get more of them in the future. It's been hinted that we might. It's also been suggested that Rio and Agatha were married in some sort of way, and the show's creator has confirmed that herself. It's also been suggested that Agatha's child is Rio's child as well. So Rio is Agatha's ex, who is basically coming after Agatha. They've got a really long, complex history, and when we first meet Rio, it's obvious that that's the case, and it's pretty complex between them. She helps Agatha break free from Wanda's spell, and we don't really know who she is at first, apart from they've got history. The first scene of them truly together, you could say, is when she's trying to kill Agatha, or at the very least fight Agatha. And there's a lot of tension and a lot of subtext between them. Not so much symbolism as of yet, but as the story progresses, we do get more of that. The first time she appears is in a flashback with one of the other characters as Death, though we don't really know it's Rio yet in the show. However, her appearance in that moment is very Santa Muerte-esque. Now, Santa Muerte, aka Saint Death, she is portrayed as a skeleton figure in a black robe. Although it's usually black, sometimes it can be different colours as well. She's a Catholic folk saint primarily worshipped and venerated in South America, but honestly now, her worship is spread worldwide. She was based upon an Aztec death goddess. She is a psychopomp. Her name suggests that, Saint Death, and she resides over Death. Now, the imagery in that scene of Death is probably intentional, given that in the comics she's often portrayed as a skeleton, meaning Death, the character, and also when anyone thinks of Death, the skull might be one of the first things we think of. But it's not lost on me that this particular imagery was used over something else. I mean, they could have picked something like the Grim Reaper, for example, and it was used because of A, making sure that anybody would understand who or what this was, and B, a link to Santa Muerte or a hypersigil. Now, Rio is then summoned by the other characters later on to a place called the Witch's Road, which in itself is also a hypersigil. It's for the representation of the crooked path, of the tree of life, tree of death, that kind of vibe. It's something I might look into in the future as well. But when she's summoned, Rio's first introduces herself as the Green Witch. And at that moment, we start to see more of her symbolism unfold. Now, death as an archetype is not just about the end of life, it's about rebirth. It's about the cycle of life and death. Because in all things, not just human beings, we all must die, and we all will die. And this is a way for new life to be born, whether it's a human life, an animal, a plant. Green witches, on the whole, understand the importance of this cycle, as they, in their very essence, are in touch with spirits of nature, of plants, and things like that. And even those witches like me, who are not really drawn to that kind of thing, we still should have an understanding of this. It makes me think of Persephone. It makes me think of that archetype of the cycle. So Persephone is the Hellenic goddess of both the underworld and of spring. She is the representation of this cycle of life and death. It's not just Persephone. There is another goddess that I can think of called Izanami, and she is from Shintoism. She is the divine feminine archetype in Shintoism and the matriarch. She is a creator goddess, and she was known as the goddess of life because of that. But she was also the first ever being to die, and therefore becomes the goddess of death, and the one that resides over the Japanese underworld, which is called Yomi. So across cultures, there is a reoccurring theme with some death goddesses showing this cycle that for women as well, in our very nature, we are the cycle, because we can create life in our womb if we wish to. And like everybody, we will pass away at some point. So we are both. Now, again, to an outsider looking in, it might just be a plot device in the show. After all, you know, they're going to be looking at things like this. They're going to be looking at symbolism, stuff like this. And for an outsider, she was summoned to just be a replacement green witch. But later, we get to know more things about her, and more things are revealed. And it works at getting people to question, well, is death also about life? Further in the story, there's a scene where the witches encounter a ghost. And Rio says she hates ghosts in this point. And that, to me, makes sense. As a Hecatean witch, I know firsthand how Hecate is a goddess that rules over the restless dead. And she doesn't want anyone to become a lost soul. She calls them lost souls. The restless dead are lost souls, you see, because they are ghosts, they are people that basically haven't been able to move on for one reason or another, whether it's unfinished business or something that they were not fulfilled in life, or could be anything like that. The spirit becomes earthbound, and this is where we get a lot of hauntings from and things like that. Now, it would make sense that a death goddess would not be the biggest fan of ghosts, as they are not so willing to cross over most of the time, and they are a bit of, with the greatest of respect, a bit of a pain in the arse. And that's just to make light of a bad situation, of course. Again, though, to somebody outside who doesn't have any experience in this world, like maybe I do, or you, or mediums, or anyone in the spiritual realm that talks with the dead, they won't know that kind of thing. So again, it puts a question in their head of, well, why does she hate ghosts? Why? Now, in a flashback scene, there's a few of them, but we do see a younger Rio and Agatha and some of their memories together. When she's in these scenes as a whole, she doesn't look scary or foreboding, because death isn't always these things anyways. And she looks more like the Green Witch. Even her dress, her clothes are green, and they reflect that. There is a scene where Agatha's giving birth to her baby, and Rio is there because the baby isn't supposed to survive. And it's hinted that, it's going to be a stillbirth. And Rio is there as death to collect the soul. But after Agatha pleads with her, Rio allows the child to live. The subtext here is that she and Agatha are parents of said child, though that's not outright confirmed in the show, it's been hinted at. But regardless of parentage, It shows that she, as death, has enough empathy to spare a child. This shows how patient and kind death goddesses and deities can be. Death isn't always cruel. Death isn't always dark or violent or evil. These deities, just because they're archetypes and rule over death, it doesn't make them that. It doesn't make them evil. Because death is a necessary part of life, after all. Now, in another flashback scene, Rio has to take the now grown child, Nikki, meaning he's going to pass over. And she does it in a very symbolic way. When she appears, she's wearing a hooded cloak and carrying a torch, very much like Hecate. She takes him in a kind way, like a mother would to their child, regardless as to whether she is his parent or not. Doesn't matter, it's still a very motherly energy. The symbolism of the torch, to anyone who doesn't know of Hecate, if they were to ever find out about her, well, they'd probably see the link and the fact that Hecate isn't actually all that cruel in her approach. Now, near the end of the show, and also major spoiler alerts for this bit, if you don't want to know, I'm warning you. But Agatha dies. And she dies after kissing Rio. You see, Agatha has a special power where she can absorb other people's powers. So in this moment, she very much has the kiss of death. Now, upon her grave, Rio allows an array of different flowers to grow. Again, linking Rio to the Green Witch archetype. In fact, she's often portrayed throughout the show with a flower in her hand. And I believe it's symbolism that it's part of life and death. I believe there's also further symbolism into the different flowers used within the show as to the meanings behind said flowers and the scene that she has said flowers in. I don't know the full ins and outs of that, but if you want to look it up, I'm sure there is symbolism to that. Now, when Agatha does die, Rio is very upset, and it's a reoccurring theme in the show between her and Agatha, just to show like how compassionate Rio can be, or how compassionate death can be. It doesn't always want to take people away. It's something that it has to do. There is another scene in the show where she says to Agatha about "she is my scar." That scene is an example of death being capable of love and compassion. And that scene is Rio talking about when she had to take away Agatha's child, and it wasn't because she was evil or spiteful or because she wanted to do that. She actually didn't want to do that. She had to do it. So, all in all, there's a hell of a lot of symbolism there. Whether it's intentional or not, some of it will be. Of course it will. Given the nature of the TV show, they're going to be doing their research. It's obvious. There's always the mundane reasons to stuff like this. But the intention is to expose people, perhaps who are not informed of this world, meaning the spiritual world, to the reality of it. And the reality of the death goddess archetype through this portrayal of Rio. And perhaps one day people might meet her. I mean, especially, the day we all have to face, we probably all will. But maybe they'll be more understanding and less frightened, and perhaps things will be less alien to them. But as with other hypersigils, as they're called, some is going to be with an intention, whether it is the same intention it's intended or not. So what I mean by that is, in this case, you've got an established character from a comic book that was intended to be that way, that is now in a cinematic universe, that is a witchy TV show, which will have a lot of research behind it and stuff like this, of course. So they want it to seem legit and a good story, But even though it's intentional for storytelling purposes, I don't think it was intentional for them to actually wake people up to the reality of, oh, death goddesses like Hecate, Persephone, Santa Muerte, etc. are like Rio, and that they behave in ways like Rio does. They love humans when they want to love humans. They show compassion. They show patience. They have certain tropes about them, certain symbolism that if we are exposed to it, we can recognise and feel maybe more at home with such things. So this was just another example. I've got more examples. If you've got examples you want me to cover, please put it in the comments. Let me know. I'm interested. You know, there's more obvious ones out there. I said this in the other video. Some of our gods, goddesses, etc., as an example, are portrayed directly in modern media. Lilith's a good example of that. Lilith's in the Diablo games. Lilith's also a character in these comics and in a game. Lilith is in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, for example, another witchy show. It's direct, but then there's other things out there that's not really meant to be so direct. Like an example I gave before on another video was Stranger Things. It's a creepy sci-fi show, creepy fantasy. It's not meant to be so in your face direct that this is the astral realm and these are astral parasites. But it also is. And if you know, you know. And that's what hypersigils are about, is what I'm trying to say. All right. So we're going to be covering more stuff like this. I probably will go through Stranger Things at one point as well. But if there's anything more you want me to cover, any characters, anything like this, hit me up. Hit me up. I'm very interested in doing so. If you made it this far, if you liked it, you know what to do. Hit subscribe, stick around. And yeah, until next time, stay safe, stay witchy. Bye.